Context influences everything. We're in the context of this beautiful church, built in a style that reflects its Anglican Christian roots. Roots that bring with it a tradition with liturgical rhythm, and right now we are in the season of Lent. A season in which we simplify our living as we prepare for the pivotal feast of Easter. It is in this context that we hear today's readings. The first reading from Genesis tells of a very pivotal moment in the God Abram-Sarai relationship. Through committing to covenant relationship with their one God, Abram becomes Abraham and Sarai Sarah. Something fundamental shifts. They end up not as they were. Abram becomes Abraham, Sarai becomes Sarah, are no longer just old, faithful, but without shared progeny to have a future for their lineage people. No, they become fruitful, continuing ancestry people. Barrenness becomes fertility. Who they are in their context changes completely. In the gospel, we hear Jesus openly declaring the non-triumphal repercussion of following the way he walks. Living the Jesus way of self-emptying priority does not look pretty. Peter thought he knew the context he was in. He had expectations of a Messiah and where being a follower might lead. And it is definitely not the program that Jesus just outlined. This too is a pivotal moment for Peter. Apparently defeat brings triumph. Peter's identity in his context was completely challenged. So context and identity are in close relationship with one another, and I want to share with you a story. It happened in Washington, D.C. at a metro station back in 2007, way back then. This man with a violin was in the metro, and he played 6 Bach pieces for about 45 minutes. During that time, approximately 2,000 people went through the station, most of them on their way to work. After about 3 minutes, a middle-aged man noticed. He noticed there was a musician playing. He slowed his pace, stopped for a few minutes, then hurried on to keep his schedule. About 4 minutes later, the violinist received his first $1. A woman threw in the money into his hat without stopping and kept on walking. At 6 minutes, a young man leaned against the wall to listen to him. Then he looked at his watch and started to walk again. At 10 minutes, a 3-year-old boy stopped, but his mother tugged him along hurriedly. The child stopped to look at the violinist again, but the mother pushed hard, and the child continued to walk, turning his head the whole time. This action was repeated by several other children, but every parent, without exception, forced their children to move on quickly. At 45 minutes, the musician played continuously. Only 6 people stopped and listened for a short while. About 20 gave money but continued to walk at their normal pace. The man collected a total of $32. After 1 hour, he finished playing and silence took over. No one noticed, no one applauded, there was no recognition at all. No one knew this, but the violinist was Joshua Bell, one of the greatest musicians in the world. He played one of the most intricate pieces ever written, with a violin worth $3.5 million. 2 days before, Joshua Bell's had a sold-out theatre in Boston where the seats averaged $100. Remember, 2007. Each to sit and listen to him play that exact same music. This is a true story. Joshua Bell played incognito in the DC metro station, was organised by the Washington Post as part of a social experimentation about perception, taste, and people's priorities. So context for identity and understanding really seems to matter. On Ash Wednesday, as Nick and I were returning to the office from our midday Ash Wednesday service, we were paused out here in Federal Street waiting for the traffic moving up the street to clear. The last vehicle was a police van. It stopped in front of us. The young female officer driving the van sort of put the window down and leaned over and said, "What's this? What is that? I'm seeing it all on people all over town." Nick and I laughed. "Oh, it's Ash Wednesday," I said. She looked somewhat puzzled. We're about 6 weeks out from Easter, and we have a service where people get the sign of crossmat on their forehead with ashes. It marks the beginning of preparing for Easter, time for simplifying and reflecting. The church calls it a penitential season. "Oh, okay," she replied, quite happily, but not looking any less puzzled. At least she knew what it was called now. She didn't have any context for it. So if context for identity matters, and the context is church, with its religious lineage story and a gospel that today proclaims that how we live is a matter of life and death. Life if you live the good news, self-emptying, not all about me way, death if you don't. How do we live out this weird potential fullness of life gospel identity in a world that largely has no context for it? Especially when, like today, it proclaims a priority completely upside down to the normal ways the world operates. People passing in the subway, as we heard, they had absolutely no idea of Joshua Bell's identity out of context. But let me ask you, did it make Joshua Bell less talented? Did it make Bach's music any less beautiful or hard to play? Or his violin any less valuable? Did those sorts of things depend upon the context? Because as we make our way through life, as some of us decide to burrow into the story of Christianity or religion, or there might be certain causes or things that catch our attention, that intrigue us and interest us, or perhaps freak us out, perhaps out of concern on their impact on individuals or our community, our context or our world, we decide to go and have a really good look at them. We explore, delve and dive into them. We become learned and we become incredibly passionate, and we really want to share. But in our enthusiasm, we can forget that those we want to share with have not done our legwork. They haven't any context or entree into that world of interest. So when in bursting enthusiasm we go to share, we can be met with completely blank stares, utter incomprehension. Like that absolutely lovely young police officer. She was very polite, but what the heck? There's no shared context for translation. Does it matter? Does it take from the essence of our passion? It matters to us. It's vitally important from our context. Whether it's about the urgent and immediate need to change because the climate crisis is now, or the sense that we need to increase people's participation in religion so there is continuity. The thing is that the agency to change lies within a person. It's only through their desire for inner change that anything will shift. We cannot do that to someone. What we can do is we can influence through the way we live out our passion. We can decide to grow deeply in knowing in a way that opens for our understanding to be tested so that we are grounded and wholly living in it, in our doing and being. Because it is in us to do so. Because it's who we are. Not to gain sort of secondary motivation, to stockpile information as some sort of weapon where we can strategically deploy against those not convinced or converted. Because it's in us. I do struggle with the either-or language of today's gospel, but maybe it's telling us the way things are. If we live our lives in a way that is all about us, about what we can get, what we can achieve, what we manipulate and take for ourselves, where do we end up? What do we end up with? Jesus' way, his words are of letting go and opening so that the full life, that energy of creation can flow. Jesus names and resists behaviours and systems that seek to block that and divert that and prevent it, because then injustice will flourish. So when our ways are to collect and grasp and keep for ourselves, deeply in us, I think something dies, because we too have stopped allowing the flow of life, of potential, of possibility, and of flourishing to be made known in the world through us.